Welcome back to Physics Lite. In part 4, we want to talk about space and time, which in my little universe is not the same as space-time. I'm sure all of you have heard about the 4 elementary forces: the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. The interesting thing is, the first 2 forces are short-range forces, whereas the last 2 forces are long-range forces. In theory, electromagnetism and gravity reach from one end of the universe to the other one. In my little universe, the first 2 forces, the short-range forces, are primarily matter-mediated, whereas long-range forces are primarily space-mediated. This raises the question whether electromagnetism and gravity are just 2 sides of the same coin. Quite honestly, I cannot answer that question right now because I know very little about electromagnetism. Even in my own little universe, electromagnetism is a big enigma. If you have seen my previous videos, Physics Lite 1 and 2, you will remember this picture. I was talking about space bubbles and how they are responsible for gravity. The problem about space bubbles is when you draw a picture of space bubbles, you invariably end up with space in between, which is what? It's not space by definition. So I decided to change my little universe a little. I swapped from space bubbles to space cubes, which solves the problems. The principles still remain the same. Mass A and mass B attract each other by injecting magic potions in the space cubes in between, thus decreasing the space cube resistance. As you may remember, I call this magic potion spatial facilitation. It reduces the resistance of space cubes against matter and energy. The same magic potion is responsible for inertia. If you have a mass A traveling at constant speed from left to right, it injects this magic potion called spatial facilitation into space cubes in front of it. The magic thing about this is spatial facilitation is never consumed up. Gravity lasts forever, and the same is true for inertia. Isn't it amazing that this magic potion never is consumed up? It lasts forever, be it gravity or inertia. So, in summary, in my little universe, spatial facilitation is caused by mass and possibly electromagnetism. At this stage, there are 3 different kinds of spatial facilitation in my little universe. The 3 different kinds of spatial facilitation are microfacilitation or microfas, macrofacilitation or macrofas, and galactic facilitation, or GALFAS. Microfacilitation is caused by parts that are so small that they fit in one single space cube. For instance, electrons, hydrogen atoms, and helium atoms. In the double slit experiment, they cause interference patterns. Microfast takes time to build up and then affects all small parts. Macrofacilitation is caused by parts that are too big to fit in one single space cube. In the double slit experiment, they do not cause interference patterns. Macrofacilitation affects only the part that caused the effect in the first place. Galactic facilitation affects all masses in a whole galaxy. It causes peripheral stars to rotate faster than central stars without being blown away. Galactic facilitation may have something to do with black holes and huge electromagnetic fields. The beauty about the concept of galactic facilitation is that it does away with the need for dark matter. I may not know much about physics, but life has taught me that whatever sounds too fantastic to be true is too fantastic to be true. And everything I've heard about dark matter sounds way too fantastic to be true. The whole thing reminds me of an ancient Danish fairy tale called The Emperor's New Clothes. By the way, spatial facilitation does not necessarily mean that gazillions of space cubes are rotating. Spatial facilitation is a functional thing rather than a structural one. I'm talking about software rather than hardware. Let's now talk a little about time. In my little universe, time is a measure of change. Only where change is time. An empty space cube at the end of our universe may rest in peace for tens of billions of earthly years without aging, which means an empty space cube is not affected by time. It does not even know what time is. In my little universe, time is not an independent continuum along with space. In my little universe, there is no space-time. Now I've just said that empty space cubes at the ends of our universe do not experience time, they do not age. Does that mean they do not change? Not necessarily so. Have a look at the top part of the drawings here. It shows cube A, which is empty, and its neighboring cubes left and right. Nothing happens, nothing changes. But now, in the bottom part of the picture, we add a mass 1 and a mass 2 to the space cubes, and all of a sudden we get changes. Spatial facilitation is created between mass 1 and mass 2. So, what about this story about no change, no time? No change, no time is absolutely correct, but this does not mean that every change signals time. Let's have a look at a photon that travels from one end of the universe to the other one. It may take 40 billion earthly years or longer. At the end of the journey, the photon will not have lost all its teeth, it will not have wrinkles all over, and it will not have gray hair. It will be as young and crisp as it was when it set out on its journey. The photon constantly changed its position, and yet it did not age. It did not experience time. In my little universe, time is not a fourth dimension. Time is a property of matter. No matter, no time. Only matter experiences time. Only matter can age. The misconception of time being a fourth dimension has nothing to do with time per se. It has to do with how we conceive and measure time. As human beings, we consist of matter, and we are thus permanently confronted with time. We cannot imagine a world without time. So we disregard the limits of our own time. We assume that time reaches from one end of the universe to the other, like space. Let's try a little experiment. Let's turn on the lights in our bedroom. We may think of our bedroom as being a four-dimensional structure with three spatial dimensions and time. But when we switch on the lights, we create photons jumping all over the place. And those photons don't know what time is. They don't age. So we create a time-free phenomenon in the middle of our world. I think matter is the playground of energy. It forms an interface where all sorts of energies can reduce their differences in potentials and thus increase entropy. If you have watched my video on entropy, you will know that in my opinion, entropy is the sum of all potential differences at the beginning of our universe divided by the potential differences now.